Think about this. What if everything you're striving so hard to achieve and the love you crave, the success you chase, the peace you yearn for, could arrive only when you stop trying to force it? Imagine spending your whole life swimming upstream, exhausting yourself in the current, only to realize that if you had just let go, the current would have carried you exactly where you needed to be. In this journey, we're going to uncover something profound, that releasing control doesn't mean giving up. It means surrendering to a deeper intelligence, one that's been guiding you all along. And the final insight in this video, the last one we'll explore, is the most powerful of them all. It could completely shift the way you experience life. Stay with me, because by the end, something within you might just awaken. Now ask yourself, why do we cling so desperately to control? The need for control is deeply rooted in fear. Fear of uncertainty, fear of chaos, fear of loss. Control becomes our armor. We plan, predict, manage, and micromanage because unpredictability feels like danger. But here's the paradox. In our desperate attempts to avoid discomfort, we create more suffering. Psychologist Carl Jung once said, "What you resist persists." The more you resist the flow of life, the more entangled you become in the very problems you're trying to escape. Let's look at the human experience. We are meaning-making creatures. We want to understand, to predict, to feel safe. And in a world that often feels uncertain, control feels like security. But what if the real security comes from something far more profound? Trust. Trust is not naive. It is the most courageous act of all. Trusting the process of life requires strength. It requires the humility to say, "I don't know how this will unfold, but I am open to something greater than my current understanding." In the Tao Te Ching, Lao Tzu writes, "When I let go of what I am, I become what I might be." There's something incredibly liberating about this. Letting go doesn't strip you of power. It reconnects you to it. Let's take a moment and reflect. Where in your life are you trying to force an outcome? Is it a relationship you're clinging to? A career you're trying to control? A timeline you're obsessing over? What if the very act of control is the barrier keeping that desire from manifesting? Modern psychology supports this idea. Research in acceptance and commitment therapy shows that psychological flexibility, the ability to be open to experiences rather than trying to control them, is a strong predictor of well-being. People who try to control their internal states, their thoughts, emotions, and sensations, often experience more distress, not less. The irony is striking. Control doesn't give us peace. It steals it. Consider this. Have you ever achieved something you desperately wanted, only to feel empty or anxious afterward? That's what happens when desire is driven by attachment. We believe we must have it to be whole, but wholeness is not found in acquisition. It's found in surrender. Spiritual teacher Eckhart Tolle explains that presence, true presence, arises only when we release resistance to the moment. When we stop saying this shouldn't be happening and start saying this is what is, we align with life rather than fight against it. But this doesn't mean we stop dreaming, creating, or striving. It means we shift the source of our action. We act not from fear but from trust, not from desperation but from inspiration, not from control but from flow. This is where real power emerges, because when you act from trust, your actions are infused with clarity. You stop forcing, you start flowing. You're no longer pushing against life, you're moving with it. Ask yourself, what happens when you replace control with curiosity? Instead of saying, "This must go this way," you ask, "I wonder what this could become." Instead of demanding certainty, you invite possibility. This mindset isn't passive, it's receptive. It's deeply engaged. It's the artist in the flow state, the athlete in the zone, the child fully immersed in play. They're not thinking about outcomes. They're fully present with the process, and ironically, this is when magic happens. Neurologist and psychiatrist Viktor Frankl, who survived the Holocaust, wrote in his book, Man's Search for Meaning, "Don't aim at success. The more you aim at it and make it a target, the more you are going to miss it. Success will follow you precisely because you had forgotten to think about it." Let that sink in. This isn't just philosophy, it's a blueprint for freedom. Because when you release control, what you're really doing is releasing fear. And when fear no longer drives your life, something extraordinary takes its place. Presence, clarity, peace. So here's a question I invite you to answer in the comments. Where in your life are you still trying to force an outcome? and what might happen if you chose to release it instead. And remember, this is only the beginning. What comes next might just change the way you look at your desires, your plans, and your purpose. Let's go deeper. Why is letting go so difficult? Because we're conditioned to believe that control equals safety. From childhood, we're taught to take charge, to steer our destiny, to take control of our future. The message is clear. If you're not in control, something is wrong. But what if that's a lie? What if the constant striving, the obsessive planning, the anxiety of managing every little detail is not a path to safety, but a path to burnout? The truth is, control gives the illusion of security, but never the reality of peace. Now consider this. Every major transformation in your life, the most meaningful relationships, the unexpected opportunities, the moments of clarity, how many of them came from something you planned, and how many came from something you allowed? Sometimes the most beautiful chapters of our lives begin when we stop trying to write the script. This is not about being passive. It's about aligning with a deeper rhythm, a higher intelligence. Call it intuition. Call it divine timing. Call it the universe. Whatever name you give it, you've felt it before, those moments when everything just clicks, not because you forced it, but because you flowed with it. Let's bring this into practical perspective. Imagine a person who desperately wants love. They obsess over finding the right partner. They analyze every interaction. They try to control how they appear, how they're perceived, how others respond. But love, real love, does not arise from control. It arises from authenticity, from presence, from being, not managing. When you stop trying to manipulate outcomes, you start to attract what's meant for you. The psychologist Abraham Maslow spoke about self-actualization, the realization of one's full potential. He said that people who are self-actualized live from a state of inner freedom. They are not obsessed with controlling life. They are aligned with it. They act, but without attachment to the outcome. Can you feel the difference? One way creates pressure. The other creates power. In Buddhism, there is a concept known as non-attachment. It doesn't mean indifference. It doesn't mean apathy. It means loving, living, working, creating, without clinging, without gripping, without saying, "This must go exactly as I want." It means doing your part, then surrendering the rest. Now take a breath and ask yourself, what am I clinging to right now? Maybe it's the need for approval. Maybe it's the desire to have all the answers. Maybe it's a rigid plan for how your life should unfold. What would happen if you gently loosened your grip? Sometimes we cling not because we're strong, but because we're afraid. Afraid of falling, afraid of failing, afraid of facing the unknown. But the unknown is not the enemy. It's the birthplace of all possibilities. The most extraordinary things in life often emerge from the very places we feared most. Think of a time when something didn't go as planned, but in hindsight it turned out to be a blessing. A closed door that led to a better one. A loss that led to growth. A disappointment that revealed a deeper truth. That's the gift of surrender. It creates space. Space for grace. Space for miracles. The spiritual teacher Michael Singer, author of The Untethered Soul, explains that letting go is not about fixing the world. It's about releasing the part of you that believes the world must be fixed in a certain way to be okay. He says, the moment you're willing to accept responsibility for everything in your life is the moment you gain the power to change it. Responsibility does not mean control. It means presence. You are responsible for your presence, your energy, your choices, not the outcome of every situation. And this shift in perspective is liberating. Because once you stop trying to control what's outside of you, you gain mastery over what's within you. That's real freedom. And yet here's the surprising twist. When you release control, outcomes often improve. Not because you're trying harder, but because you're in harmony with life, not in conflict with it. This is the paradox of surrender. You gain influence by giving up control. The business leader who trusts their team inspires more loyalty than the one who micromanages. The creative who surrenders to the muse produces more brilliance than the one who tries to engineer perfection. The person who lets go of desperate attachment to love becomes infinitely more lovable. Why? Because control is constriction, but presence is power. We've been taught to fear surrender, but true surrender is not weakness. It's the ultimate strength. It says, I trust life. I trust myself. I trust that I don't have to know everything to be okay. And now I ask you again, Where in your life could you choose trust over control? This is not a rhetorical question. Reflect on it, share it, engage with it, because these reflections create real transformation. In the next part of this journey, we'll uncover the hidden costs of control, how it affects your health, your relationships, and your inner world, and most importantly, how you can begin the practice of letting go, moment by moment. And remember, the most powerful revelation is still coming. Are you ready for what's next? Shall I proceed with the next part? If you're still with me, it's because something within you recognizes the truth in this. Control is not your path to peace. Surrender is. But let's go even further. Let's examine the hidden costs of control, the ones we rarely talk about, but feel every single day. Start with your body. Chronic stress, tension in the shoulders, the inability to sleep deeply, the mind that won't stop racing, the endless fatigue. These are not random symptoms, they are signs that we are holding on too tightly to life, trying to manage the uncontrollable. Neuroscience has shown that the brain under stress, especially the kind caused by control and perfectionism, becomes less capable of creative thinking, emotional regulation, and long-term decision-making. The prefrontal cortex, the seat of logic and clarity, actually gets hijacked by the amygdala, our fear center. So what does this mean? It means that trying to control everything literally makes us less capable of handling life effectively. The irony couldn't be clearer. The very thing we do to feel safe ends up weakening us. Now take this into your relationships. Control often shows up disguised as care. You want what's best for your loved ones, so you try to manage, advise, fix. But over time, this turns into pressure, expectations, conditions, and it creates distance. Real love doesn't need control to thrive. In fact, the more control you try to exert over someone, the less space they have to be themselves, and the more likely they are to pull away. Healthy relationships are rooted in freedom, not force, in trust, not tension. The philosopher Alain de Botton reminds us that love is not about possession, it's about appreciation. He says, maturity comes when we stop trying to change people and instead give them the freedom to grow into themselves. That's what surrender looks like in relationships. Not giving up, but giving space. The same principle applies to your purpose, your dreams, your life path. So many people walk around carrying a heavy burden, the belief that they must figure out every detail of their future, or else they will fail. But this obsession with control only creates paralysis. Fear of the unknown becomes fear of movement, and eventually, fear of living. Let go of the illusion that you must know everything before you begin. No great journey starts with all the answers. It starts with a single step, with faith, with trust, with the willingness to move, even when the path is unclear. This is the spiritual heart of surrender. It's not passive, it's active trust, and here's a powerful truth. You can live in flow without losing direction. In fact, flow is the true direction. When you align with what feels right, what energizes you, what calls you deeper, you begin to move with life, not against it. Joseph Campbell, mythologist and philosopher, famously said, "Follow your bliss, and the universe will open doors where there were only walls." But you can't follow your bliss if you're obsessed with controlling the outcome. Bliss doesn't bloom under pressure. It grows in freedom. So ask yourself, where are you sacrificing joy in the name of control? Are you pushing yourself toward a goal that no longer resonates? Are you clinging to a version of success that isn't even yours? Are you living for other people's expectations, just to feel secure? These questions are not meant to shame you, they're meant to awaken you. You deserve to live from your soul, not your survival instincts. And the shift happens when you start listening to a quieter voice, the voice within, the one that says, you don't have to hold everything together, you're allowed to rest, you're allowed to breathe, you're allowed to let go. But this takes courage, because letting go doesn't mean you'll always feel comfortable. It means you'll start to feel real, raw, present. And in that presence, you'll meet something extraordinary, your true self. Beneath the mask of control is a self that is whole, grounded, deeply intuitive, a self that doesn't need to manipulate life to feel worthy, a self that simply is. This is what spiritual traditions have spoken of for centuries, the return to presence, the end of illusion, the beginning of freedom. But let's be clear, this is a practice, not a one-time decision. You don't release control once and become enlightened. You release it every moment, every time fear arises, every time things don't go your way, every time the future feels uncertain. And when you do, you begin to notice something miraculous. Life supports you. Not always in the way you expect, but often in ways that are far more profound. Opportunities begin to appear. Doors open. Peace finds you in the most unexpected places, not because you forced it, but because you made space for it. This is the reward of surrender, the unfolding of life not by your design but by your alignment. So now I invite you again to reflect, but this time go even deeper. What would your life look like if you truly trusted it, if you released control not out of resignation, but out of wisdom? Leave a comment, write it down, speak it aloud. Let it move from concept to commitment. And stay with me, because what comes next, the final insight, is the most important of all. It ties everything together and could shift your entire perception of control, trust, and desire. Here it is. Everything you've heard so far, the inner peace, the release of fear, the power of alignment, all of it leads to one extraordinary realization. You were never in control to begin with. That's the ultimate illusion. From the day we are born, we're taught that we are the architects of our destiny, that if we just work hard enough, think long enough, plan carefully enough, we can control the outcomes of our lives. But deep down, you know, there's always something greater at play. A force that we can't predict, a timing we can't manipulate, a rhythm that laughs gently at our plans and leads us to something better, if only we allow it. This is not a message of fatalism, it's a message of faith, because here's the most powerful truth of all. Life is not happening to you, it's happening for you. Let that sink in. What if every delay, every detour, every closed door wasn't a punishment but a redirection? What if the desires you hold most tightly are not denied because you don't deserve them, but because something deeper, something wiser, is preparing you for what's truly aligned? So many people chase outcomes believing that fulfillment lives in the arrival, but fulfillment lives in the trust, in the knowing, in the surrender. You don't manifest your dreams by gripping them like lifelines. You magnetize them by becoming the version of yourself who no longer needs to chase, who simply lives in resonance with what is true. The spiritual teacher Muji once said, "Feelings are just visitors. Let them come and go." But the same is true for desires, plans, even identities. They are all temporary, passing, evolving. And so the question is not, how do I control the outcome? The question is, who am I when I stop needing to control anything? Can you be still in uncertainty? Can you trust when nothing is guaranteed? Can you remain open even when life feels closed? These are the questions that define your spiritual maturity, your emotional evolution, your liberation. Because here's something extraordinary. When you finally release control, not just intellectually but fully, you don't lose power. You become power. You become presence itself. You move with life, not against it. You radiate a kind of energy that people feel without words. You become magnetic, because nothing is more attractive than someone who is deeply at peace with the unknown. So let's get even more practical, right now. Ask yourself, in what area of your life are you trying hardest to control the outcome? Is it your relationship status, your career path, your financial security, your identity? What would it feel like to loosen the grip? Not to abandon your dreams, but to stop strangling them. To breathe into your becoming, to live in the space between effort and ease, the sacred space where miracles unfold, where grace descends, where timing is no longer yours to force, but to trust. Let's not forget, surrender doesn't mean you do nothing. It means you do the inner work, the alignment, the preparation, and then let go of your need to manage the process. You do your part, and you trust life to do its part. And now, listen closely, because this is the final, most important revelation of all. You are not here to control life. You are here to experience it, fully. You are not here to predict every step, avoid every mistake, or anticipate every turn. You are here to feel it all, the beauty, the heartbreak, the mystery, the serendipity. And when you release the belief that you must be in charge of everything, you finally begin to live. You laugh more. You love deeper. You see clearer. You stop fighting what is and start flowing with what can be. You begin to trust that everything you desire, peace, love, abundance, purpose, does not come from force. It comes from resonance. From becoming the kind of person who can receive what's already waiting. Because the truth is, Everything you desire arrives when you release control, not as a punishment, but as a blessing, not because you gave up, but because you grew up, because you finally understood that your power was never in the pressure. It was always in your presence. So I'll leave you with this. Let go. Let life breathe. Let your soul rest. And trust that what's meant for you is not behind you. It's on its way. Not in your grip, but in your surrender. And when it comes, you'll realize it was never about the outcome. It was always about becoming the person who no longer needed it to feel whole. If this message touched something in you, speak on it. Share what you're releasing today, what you're no longer gripping, what you're ready to trust. Because when one person releases control, it gives others permission. Thanks for looking.